What I want to show you is that the liberal friends that you see on the news don't have your best interests in heart. What they really want to do is punish anybody that has money and keep the status quo. This whole liberal Democrat idea has not worked in the last 40 years. It actually has failed. Now, Trump comes up with a tax plan which could actually be a benefit for all Americans. And instead, they don't like it because it benefits corporations, the evil corporations, which we all buy our stuff and clothes from, and also the rich, who also create the jobs and where we at the places in which we work. All right, let's take a look. Well, going by his tax plan, the standard deductions for individual or lower individual low income or middle class will double. And also, if you look under married or joint, you don't have to pay the first $24,000 in taxes. So
We're doing reform. No. The whole point of this is the last things that he mentioned. Giant tax cuts, not for small businesses, for huge businesses.
Dude, what the hell you talking about? A small business will be able to declare 15% the corporate tax instead of having to declare it on their private taxes. What the hell?
Yeah, capital gains and dividends, etc. The taxes he's talking about. That's for Goldman Sachs. Yeah. Oh, look at that, Gary Cohn, the guy you just saw.
No, dummy. It's not for just Goldman Sachs. What about me? I don't work for them. I think this is the problem with people. We all just think that basically the only people who invest in stock are rich people. And then we wonder why rich people get rich and the poor get poor. They're not buying big screen TVs, people. They're buying stocks and bonds. What are you buying with your money? Club trip? Think about it.
Anything in the law called the death tax, but I do know that they're getting rid of the estate tax and the alternative minimum tax as well. Now, both of those incredibly interesting and incredibly important to incredibly wealthy people.
The death tax they're talking about has to do with the fact that if your parents die, you have to pay tax on their property in order to get it. I don't know about you, but he probably doesn't know about what a death tax is because his parents are probably bums. But if you work hard your whole life, you save money, you would like to leave something for your children, or if you are even a parent who would like to leave something for your children, it'd be nice for them to be able to get it.
Which means it simplifies the process by which you file, which we all know is an enormous headache. The corporate tax rate is going from 35% to 15%, and that's going to apply to small, medium, and large businesses. So if you're a small business owner out there,
middle class?
What's the cut for the middle class? Everyone's getting a tax cut. Everyone's getting a tax cut. Well, it's 35, 25, and 12%. So 25% would be the tax bracket that many middle class people would fall into. So it's 35, 25, and 12.
Why not 35?
We had 7 brackets.
Why not 35?
Why not 35?
Yeah, for the middle class. I mean, these are the people we're always talking about. Folks need to take care of. Why not a gigantic? Why not a gigantic cut for the middle class?
Yeah. I heard somebody on TV. I forget who it is, but he said that that Trump could save like $1 billion in taxes.
He's going to benefit beautifully.
I really believe that he ran for president just so that he could cut his own taxes. He had no interest in it.
Stop it. Get some help.
What this is about is whether or not the rich benefit in any way. If the rich get any benefits or anything from this deal, no one wants it. Or I should say no liberal want it. They don't understand the difference between hard work and earning something and getting handouts. I can't explain this. They don't really want the best for you, because if they want the best for you, they would tell you what you needed to do so you could become better, and not tell you just to take money from them.
Wouldn't it be sensible, if the great problem is jobs and a large part of that problem is in the construction industry, wouldn't it be sensible for the government to simply try to employ these people directly? I don't mean the government employing them, but do roads, bridges, and highways, which puts private contractors back into the hiring business and effectively create jobs directly, rather than hoping that people who get tax cuts will start spending again.
I think that's right, Fareed. I think that it is useful because I think it's possible that the Republicans would agree to exempting, let's say, the first $20,000 of income from the payroll tax. for a year, that would put money directly in people's pockets, and they would arguably spend at least 50 or maybe 60% of that. That would be a direct stimulus. But as you point out, I think it is also very useful to extend large public projects, or even a WPA, as we had during the Depression, Works Projects Administration, to put the long-term unemployed directly back to work, or a civilian conservation corps to put millions of young people who are jobless directly to work. We have public parks, for example, that are closed. We have all kinds of needs with regard to teachers' aides and in hospitals, many things that are jobs that are not filled because nobody can afford them. The public cannot afford them. Well, better to have people do these jobs directly than to have people sitting home collecting unemployment insurance.
And once again, socialism shows up again. So what he's telling us to do is, since we don't have jobs, make paper jobs, fake jobs, and have people going to the construction sites on the road. Now, how many people collecting welfare do you know, giving the choice, would say, hey, you know what, let's forget this money I'm getting at home for free for sitting around. Let me go to a bridge and start digging some ditches. That's the best thing to do instead of staying here and living the easy ghetto life. Now, come on, does that make any sense? Now, in a little bit, he's going to give an example, and the example is the same example that they always give, and is always talking about World War II. But what they don't understand is World War II was not really saved by the parks and recreation centers in America. It was saved by World War II. And we'll get more on that after this, but I just want you to think about that.
We may have public parks that are closed, but we also have a national balance sheet that is totally busted. The federal government and state and local governments are out of money. And so the Keynesian game is over, and there's really, literally nothing that Washington can do about the job problem. Washington has to get back to its business, which is managing the budget and beginning to pay our bills. And unfortunately, that is probably going to compound the job problem rather than resolve it, but we have no choice unless we want to end up where Europe is today and where Greece is. We simply are rolling the dice if we think we can keep borrowing now that the Fed is out of the market, QE2 is over, and the other central banks are no longer buying the bond. It would be a grave mistake to go back to the failed stimulus policies of the last 2 or 3 years or even decade.
But David, you would accept that the consequence of that kind of tightening, that austerity, would be even more people would be unemployed, and therefore tax revenues would fall. I mean, in other words, the scenario you're painting is pretty grim.
Yes, that's the dilemma that we're in. We're in an inflationary cycle. We can't afford to borrow more. We can't afford to create artificial demand and artificial employment. And so therefore, we're likely to have unemployment in the teens for the balance of the teens, that is, for a decade or more. That's the mess that we have created after 30 years of tax giveaways and lack of control on entire...
America is like that neighbor that's in debt, and he keeps paying off each credit card with another credit card, buying new credit cards and paying off that credit card with the next credit card and the next credit card until he's in so much debt it's no way to get out, and he still refuses to organize his bills or anything. That is exactly what's happening right now. We have too many entitlements, and this is not the first time this has happened in history. We have too many entitlements. We got too much money going out and not enough coming in. And people are starting to lose confidence in our dollars. And that drives up inflation. So our dollars are worth less and less and less. I mean, this is common economics. That guy does not understand it, and American people do not understand it. They just want free stuff. And we keep going this way.
Look, when consumers are scared, they have a huge debt load, they're worried about their wages, which are falling in real terms, they're worried about their jobs, they're in no position to buy. They are pulling away because their housing prices, in addition, are going down. They're a major nest egg. When consumers are pulling away from spending, when businesses are not going to make new investments, they're sitting on $1.9 trillion. It's not a problem of businesses not having access to capital or the money. They're not going to build new facilities or create new jobs without customers.
And that's why you have to lower the corporate rate. You lower the corporate rate, you drive countries to your nation. This is basic economics, and this has happened already.
So you've got the private sector in a kind of paralysis right now. This is when the public sector has got to fill in the gap. We learned this painfully in the 1930s. We learned it in the 1940s. The Second World War, the debt to GDP ratio got up to 120%. Was that a terrible thing? Well, actually, it put America back to work and led the way toward an extraordinary, spectacular 30 years of prosperity after the Second World War. So I don't know. I mean, David Stockman is not looking at history.
In 1941, the United States was still recovering from the Great Depression. The jobless rate had been as high as 25%. Bankruptcy was not uncommon, and the standard of living for most Americans was 60% lower than before the stock market crash of 1929. When the war started, all that changed. More people were needed to produce the food and weapons for the men on the front lines. The new jobs were taken by many who had been out of work for several years. As more men were sent away to fight, women were hired to take over their positions on the assembly lines. Before World War II, women had generally been discouraged from working outside the home. Now they were being encouraged to take over jobs that had been traditionally considered men's work. Existing companies changed their lines from consumer goods to war materials, and new plants were constructed strictly for the creation of products for the war effort. In Ankeny, the Des Moines Ordnance Plant was already under construction when war was declared. By 1942, 30 and 50 caliber machine gun ammunition began to roll off the line.
That's what happened. It wasn't Roosevelt's park and recreation plan that saved the country. It was basically a world war. So unless you want to go into war with Russia or China in order to save the economy, we have to find another way. Now, before I go, I want you to check out an economist who could probably give you a better illustration than I could.
Particular. Republican Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon argued for lower tax rates in the 20s. Democratic President John Kennedy argues for cuts in the tax rates in the 1960s. Republican President Ronald Reagan, lower tax rates in the 80s, and then George W. Bush lowers tax rates once again in the 2000s. 4 experiments, as it were, one by a Democrat. In each of those 4 cases, what was the effect on the economy?
The effect on the economy was to increase the rate of growth, increase the revenue received by the government. The rich not only paid more taxes after the tax cuts for the rich, as they call it, they paid a higher percentage of all taxes. Then this started back in the 1920s. In the early 20s, the tax rate on the top income was 73%. And the people making over $100,000 paid something like 30% of all taxes. By the end of the decade, the tax rate on the top had been cut to 24%. People making over $100,000 now paid 65% of all taxes. And the reason was quite simple, that when you have the tax rate at 73%, people simply don't pay it. They put their money into tax-exempt securities and arrange their financial affairs. So what we're really talking about, do you want a symbolic high tax rate on the high-income people to win votes politically, which the rich themselves are not going to pay? Or do you really want more tax revenue coming into the government?
So the argument you say, it's an empirical matter. It can be tested. It has been tested.
It has been.
4 different times, and it always worked.
That's right.
All right.